Welcome, and remember to social media your stuff with Pathfounder, not Pathfinder with an I, but Pathfounder with an OU, Pathfounder, and Davos 2020. My name is Mike Butcher. I'm the editor-at-large for TechCrunch, who you might have heard of, we cover tech, and also the founder of a new series coming out of London and going international now called Pathfounder, all about sustainable tech, impact innovation. So, without further ado, let's introduce our panel. Let's hear next from Vera Futujansky, who's an impact investor, formerly with 500 startups. Ronak Paksad, who is the CEO and founder of goodwealth.io. James Roy Poulter, who is the founder of The Reserve. And Bakar Bonello, who's CEO and founder of Found Fair Ventures. Big hand for our panel, everybody. Now, we're going to range across a number of issues to do with the impact financing, impact banking, impact entrepreneurship. Let's hear from you first. You're actually in the realm of finance for impact, Vera. When you discuss with limited partners, backers, do they get it? Do they just think it's a different kind of investing? What do you think?
Thanks, Mike. It's a very good question. Well, first of all, thanks for organizing this. It's a pleasure to be here. Really good question. So I'm based in Dubai and I manage the Middle East and Russia. I managed recently for 500 startups. And that's exactly it. What I encounter most is that people, when they hear about impact, they think of philanthropy. They think they're giving away money. So if I'm putting money on the table for this, the money is gone. It's like philanthropy or NGO. So we have to do a lot of education in that respect, and that's what I'm working on as well, that people really understand that impact investing is you give your money, but you actually also have a return on investment. It's not just giving money away. And I noticed that the younger generation of family offices really gets this now. There's still a long education process to go, but the younger generation doesn't want to just invest in real estate like their parents have done, but they want to give a certain percentage. What I've encountered now in family offices in the Middle East, it's usually what I think 20% of the yearly allocation they want to put into impact investment and offer as a VC from the side of that side of the table. I see startups really wanting to make a change as well. Before that it was about let's make something and make money and have an exit, but now it's really about let's have an impact. So I think we are now at exactly the right time to talk about impact investing. Also was on the panel yesterday with somebody from OECD who also talked about how impact investing became so much more important for them as well. I can speak more about the whole ecosystem about it later, but I'll pass on the microphone for now.
James, you've come from the world of traditional finance and stuff, but now you're doing a new kind of banking. Unpack that for us.
Yeah, sure. I think it's tied to this point here. Money makes the world go round. We all know that. We have an existing system, and everything you see around you typically exists because it has a balance sheet which allows it to behave in the way it does. Money makes the world go round, and banks have a very large say in where money goes and how money goes around the world. So I'm launching a bank called The Reserve, and that will launch on the 1st of October this year. You can actually go on thereserve.world and join us ahead of that, and actually the very first bank account was pre-bought earlier today. But the whole point is this, is that actually instead of donating some money to the Australian Fire Brigade, which is just allowing the government to use its budget to actually offset the cost of fracking, you can switch your money to a new bank, which then deploys that capital in an impact-driven way to actually have a much larger impact than putting yourself on £10 a month to the fire brigade. So yeah, a bank can actually, I've given the bank away, and I think that we want to leverage the existing system that is capitalism. It's the only system that's going to get us out of our problem right now. We don't have 10 years to have chaos. We've got to leverage what we have right now, but I do think there are strange things that profit motives do when capitalism tends to be quite short-termist. and people need to worry about their quarterly reports. And so giving a bank away to everyone such that there's a slightly different incentives where maybe the extra dollar at the end of the year doesn't matter quite as much as everyone having cleaner air when you start looking at everyone as your kind of stakeholders. But yes, so I'm totally aligned, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to pour billions, if not trillions, of dollars over the next decade into impact finance, as opposed to the Australian Fire Brigade. Not to pick them out individually, sorry.
Good point. Right. You're doing you want to democratise financial services. Tell us about that.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm the founder of Good Wealth. When I was at Morgan Stanley, a tech banker, I realized that startup employees were highly underserved when it came to unbiased financial advice. So at Good Wealth, what we're doing is we're providing financial wellness services to the future of work. What do I mean by the future of work? Is like the gig economy, contract workers, startup employees, innovators. Folks that are not necessarily rich in the bank yet, but they're innovating, they're creating, and they need to have some sort of guidance. So I'd say we're creating the Google Maps for your money plus the human guide.
Let me ask a question. Do you think that, is this going to be something that people are going to be able to get immediately, or is it going to be lots of an educational process?
So how our business model works is we work with employers. Study shows that Prudential says that employees trust their employers when it comes to benefits. So we thought, well, why don't we create a scalable, intelligent system, an app, where we partner with the employer and the employee gets to download, day one, get assigned a financial coach, which we call our Sherpas, and to be able to, have this trusted guide them through their short-term, long-term financial goals.
Great, thank you.
So, Burkhard Bernard is my name. I'm from Pathfounder Ventures, and I've been doing impact entrepreneurship and impact investing since actually over 12 years. And I think that the problem we have is that almost like probably 95% of the people out there, at least, just are not aware of the huge problem we have and what an order of magnitude this problem is. And we need to try to do everything we can, and I'm certainly doing that, everything we can to mobilize as many entrepreneurs, and I'm specifically saying entrepreneurs, not like only NGOs, but also for-profit entrepreneurs, to start focusing on solving this huge problem. And we have the largest bubble in history, which is like the frost bubble, which will combust any time. So that's what I'm doing, and that's why I'm backing Climametrics, which is a really fantastic company. Thank you for that, Nadine. And if my daughter is selling trees, everybody around me is kind of doing something. And this was different 5 years ago. So I'm seeing that in the last 3 years, we're getting more and more people around me to change and drop their jobs. Like yesterday, I had a conversation with the top manager at Aeon, and I'm almost convinced her to leave the company and completely do something else. I'll update you on that one, but it's going to be a big thing. Just as an example, every day I talk to managers to change your job.
So somewhere there's a HR manager at Aeon having a heart attack. Top executive leaves. We're going to. I think James said it well in the sense that we're, as much as we would like to reinvent the system, we don't have any time, and we've got to work with what we've got right now. And to some extent, of course, there can be many disruptive technologies and new business models, absolutely. But we're in the ship right now, and we've got to turn the ship around. It's very interesting that you said, Bagad, that people are changing their attitude, but they're not going to change their attitude if they don't get paid. They want to get paid. They want to. I guess in a way, Donald Trump, who obviously has made a big impact at Davos this year at the World Economic Forum, because he's appealing to a base of voters who want jobs, and that's his base. And they're not so worried about the environment as they are about the economy. And unfortunately, the economy is writ large. How do you guys think? Let's hear from you first. Let's go around everybody. How do we reorient finance in this direction and say, yeah, you know what, you can make money?
Interesting question. Reorient finance. Okay, I think first of all, in order to for impact investing actually to happen and to be successful, I think we need to have the whole ecosystem in place, right? So it's very important to find entrepreneurs. I think that's important to put money into the right entrepreneurs, and I want to emphasize the right money to the right entrepreneurs as well, because there's a lot of money going into places. A lot of corporates from the SDGs department want to put money somewhere but don't really do proper due diligence. I think that needs to be really looked at more, and then we need to see how do we measure impact at the end. There are a lot of things that we still need to work, but I agree with you, there's a big sense of urgency. We only have 10 years left, we have committed to solve the SDGs by 2030, so we really don't have time to wait so long. But in order for this impact ecosystem happen, I think there are several players that are really important. The entrepreneurs, I always say that I think they're in the middle, but we need, for example, the governments to be aligned, right? So for new things for new, like fintech, let's stay with the finance. There are several sandboxes. I can speak about Abu Dhabi or Riyadh or Bahrain. Sandboxes coming up in the region, so for startups to try to test projects on the ground. I worked for the Dubai government before, and Dubai offered itself as a test lab for startups to come and test their technologies on the ground, which is really important, because if you only talk about it but don't get a chance to test, you can't really advance far. So yeah, startups, governments, I think the financing is really important. I said that before, the right money going into the right places, and I almost feel there's more money available than actually startups making impact yet, so we need to be able to scale that as well. So the whole ecosystem has to be in place in order for the
we need
all the players to be in place.
All the pieces of the jigsaw. Don't forget, tweet, share on, etc. Pathfounder or Davos 2020. In a way, in a sense, perhaps we should actually get rid of the term impact finance, impact entrepreneur, and everything should become impact. All finance should become impactful.
Yeah, I agree. I've always the Venn diagram between like venture capital and impact, capital is very overlapping. At least it should be. No, I agree. I think there's multiple kind of like things here. I thought a lot about how do you get Joe Bloggs on the street, the 50 million people that are going to vote for Trump, and he will get re-elected next time, unless Andrew Yang is against him. Is because again they do care. They still have lives which are struggling, and they don't see that the impacts are not in front of them. And I thought about this lots because. With the reserve I mentioned, it's been given away. So how do you build a bank which has been given away? Well, I've given away every single dollar that I have. I've given away all my wealth to the reserve, such that we can afford to launch and run this. And the problem is, I think, I've already offended the fire brigade, but maybe I can offend Buddhists at large now. And so the challenge I've always had with Buddhism is that you reach this enlightenment, and then you end up sat under a tree for the rest of your life. And I think that's not particularly aspirational and then you reach, exactly, right? And I think that's not particularly aspirational for most normal people that get up and vote for Trump. I think they would like to know, how they can have $100 more in their bank account each month, so that if there's an emergency bill, they can afford to pay it, right? And so look, I think that the things that we're doing, and the things that are necessary to try and solve the big problems that we have to become aspirational and have to be rewarded. And actually, Mike, we've had this conversation before, but I think you can distill the problems we have in this world down to two things. An accounting problem and a moral problem. And actually, the accounting problem is much bigger than the moral problem. Because if we sorted out the accounting problem, you wouldn't even need to have the morals. Whereas if you've got the morals, you still need the accounting sorted out. And to give you the really concrete example, like oil should not be profitable to extract from the ground. But we account for it incorrectly. Right? And it's a problem with capitalism again. We just have to change the system, change accounting, and that's not just a simple thing to do, but and so it should be really profitable for these people to do the right thing. We're just not quite there yet.
Very good point, thank you.
Great points. I personally think the sentiment has really changed. Like 5 years ago, I live in Silicon Valley, and when I got interested, started getting interested in double line financial products, purpose plus profit, I went around town, talked to my VC friends saying, guys, why don't you allocate just a small portion of your fund into impact investing? 5 years ago. This is when everyone was chasing like the next Uber. And they would say, Aurora, do you really think that's sexy? But just like a couple of weeks ago, Larry Fink, that manager is the largest, asset manager in the world, BlackRock. he came out with his annual shareholder letter saying that we're going to put climate crisis at the center of our investment strategy, and that climate crisis will reshape the future of finance. So when you have someone that powerful, someone that where every other fund manager or LP or everyone else that looks up to and is like, when he basically is defining the future of finance and investing, come out with that strong of a message, then I think people will follow. It might take some time, but we're going to get there, and we're going to get to a point where there will be no such thing as impact investing. Everything will have the impact and sustainability basically included as an investment strategy.
Fantastic. Wake up.
So the problem is the time we have. I think it's 7.5 years till the 1.5 degree climate, 1.5 degree limit is surpassed. And just
Or it's locked in.
yeah, so and there's the tipping points, beyond like 2 degrees, tons of tipping points. So I think many people don't realize how big the problem is. And I was very shocked about one fact that I live in Berlin. And 14,000 years ago, Berlin was under 350 meters of ice. Now, hands up, how many people think that the temperature difference that caused this hundreds of meters of ice vis-a-vis the current temperature, how much colder was it actually? Was it like 10 degrees or more colder? Hands up. 5 degrees colder? 4 degrees colder? 3? I think nobody's putting up their hands, but it doesn't matter. Like, it's only 3 degrees. 3 degrees made the difference between 350 meters of ice and no ice. And now we've gone 1.5 degrees in the other direction. And so like literally 50% of or 60% is going to become unlivable. And everybody needs to do something about it. And I think it's really important that we need to also, how should I say, cheer the entrepreneurs that despite all the resistance out there, despite all the bad odds, and it's getting better now, but like even since years, there's people who are fighting to change something, and there's like entrepreneurs like Ariana, who's filming right now, or Nadine, and all the people on the panel. And we need to try to convince like 80%, 90% of the entrepreneurs out there to completely change what they're doing now and to just follow this thing. And to be honest, the money will follow. And the biggest, I 100% agree to, what's your name again? James. So we need an incentive system. We need to use capitalism, convert the incentives, and we need carbon taxing at the price of a few $100s, right? Because this would change everything. And we have such an easy tool to completely change all those people out there within half a year, maybe even 2 months. If carbon would cost $300 as of tomorrow, I assure you that probably half of them will go bankrupt, but the rest will change. And there's a lot of opportunities for startups like you guys and me to make a lot of money, right? But we need the right incentive system so that companies like Climametrics and all these other companies just thrive. Yeah?
But let me just ask. We heard earlier from Nadine from Climametrics, who are trying to price a company's carbon impact and data around that. Is it the case that if many flowers bloom, if we can get lots of others, you're an investor in startups, why don't you invest in more startups to produce more data, to produce therefore more pricing? No?
I actually, almost all my energy and money and time is going into impact, and I'm focused on the environment because it's the biggest problem. There's a lot of stuff like gender neutrality and all that type of stuff, but environment and climate change is by far the largest problem we have, and it's existential. So I'm doing almost everything I can, and I think what I'm trying to do is leverage myself. So I'm trying to convince as many people in my surrounding. And by the way, Berlin has succeeded in getting all the VCs, almost every single VC, to sign up that there's going to be an environmental clause in every investment agreement. So from now onwards, there will not be any financing from German VCs unless they sign this environmental clause and they become carbon neutral. That's a good step, right?
Yeah.
And so we're almost getting, and we need to do this in Silicon Valley. If Silicon Valley VCs, if like 95% of the VCs and add that climate clause, the climate clause to the contracts, that's a good step. We need that.
Mike,
Yeah.
we need you to...
We have a point, Harold.
Mike, you put an amazing group together.
Come over here.
But we need... No, we need you to write that story about the Berlin VCs in your tech front that the Valley VCs reach. So you have to do your part.
Yes,
and you
yes.
can.
Thank you. You just reminded me about the press release in my inbox that's burning a hole through my laptop that I need to get on very shortly. But I'm going to go, Burkhard, you've said a good piece there. I'm going to hand the mic to you three finally. What do you, in a final words, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, what do you think's really going to move the needle, especially in terms of, for instance, both democratising finance, but also, putting money into the system to incentivise impact?
I really think it all goes down to education. I see education of investors as super important. They need to understand why they need to invest in impact startups. They need to understand that, like I was saying before, there will be a return on investment, even if it's an impact startup. So education really is key, be it for investors or for corporates that I work with as well. They have to understand how to work with startups, why they should be choosing startups that are actually doing something environmentally friendly. So education is number one on all levels. And I mean, especially in my region as well, where I'm based, so Middle East, Russia, that I manage, I think it's changing, but it's slowly. Also because they are, I mean, it's not Europe, right? So here, or Silicon Valley, we're a bit more advanced than that. It needs a bit more time for people to feel we have reached a certain point. For example, oil. I mean, oil is big, right, in the Middle East, and that's where a lot of financing now for innovation also comes from. But to work a lot on changing the incentives and inviting startups to come and actually work on environment, attracting them and getting them, ready to stay as well.
But if the actual price of oil gets, carbon dioxide gets charged, the oil will stay on the ground.
I love the
and
idea,
that's where it
but
has to stay.
we have to stay realistic. I mean, I don't think it's possible to.
Be realistic.
I'll give you the opportunity to respond. Go ahead.
So we must be very realistic. Like, if we do not change now, and this is the very last exit, okay? So we must be very realistic. Then, like in 20 years, the world will be a different place for all of the generations to follow. So if I spoke to 2 oil managers yesterday, actually, one of them might actually change his job. We need to get the good people out of that business.
Yeah.
Every good person has to leave that business now. I mean, and by the way, regarding education, very good point. I mean, one of the reasons why I invested in climate metrics is because we're trying to create the full transparency automatically at 0 effort, so that every manager on Earth and every entrepreneur on Earth and so knows what the hell they're doing. And as soon as carbon pricing comes, they'll be prepared. They better start now.
So we've heard from education. What do you think, James? And
the challenge we have with the impacts that we're starting to make now, that the exponential actual effect of them takes too long to come into consideration, right? And so I still think you should all swap bank and sign up to the reserve. You can go on the reserve.world and do that, so please do. But I think we have to keep asking this question. So beyond pricing carbon and other things that we do damage, that we should be properly accounting for that, which I think we should do, but that requires government, or at least coordinated action across all types of standards and professional organisations. I think the second question we really have to ask ourselves is that we know humans are really bad at understanding things like exponential change or things that aren't immediately in front of our face. The reality is the change which is already occurring is probably going to kill more people than World War II. And if you went back to World War II, and I only know the numbers for like the UK, we just about struggle to spend 2% of our government budget on the armed forces. What do you think it went up to when our lives were threatened in the war? And to keep it short, 40 times higher. It went up nearly as high as 80% of the budget. And so when you really are threatened, when your existence is threatened, systems can change unbelievably quickly under this pressure to adapt and to solve and to survive and to thrive. The challenge is, and I don't have the answer to this, is how do we understand, how do we really deal with the magnitude of that threat that we can't see because it's delayed? And I don't have that answer yet.
So you mentioned education and we mentioned transparency. I think one way to convince investors and deep-pocketed people is if we created tools that we were able to measure this impact. If we could measure the impact and show them data-driven results that, listen, if you invest X dollars, this is what the bottom line is going to look like or has looked like, then we'll have a stronger argument. So that's how I look at it, education, transparency, and also entrepreneurs creating tools where as we can measure the impact.
Thank you very much, and I mean that was a really wonderful panel. I think that I'm certainly taking away the 3 degrees in Berlin under ice and take away, shall we say. There's as they say, nothing like death to concentrate the mind. But on a more upbeat note, I think it's very exciting to know that you guys and many of the people here are so invested in this issue. So for now, please thank our panel on impact and finance. Thank you. Thank you. So to close off, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be rejoined once more again by chainBLX of we have a quick, brief announcement.
I just want to say that absolutely. So Pathfounder is an awesome initiative. I would really like to say thank you to Mike. It's the right thing.
It's not the end yet.
No, but he's doing something. He's doing something. So a big applause for Mike.
Okay, thank you. Just join me briefly. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you weren't here earlier, we had a wonderful presentation from Sachin, who's the co-founder and CEO of Builder AI. You've heard a lot of things today about the future of work, the future of impact finance, impact work, impact climate, for instance. What are some of your takeaways?
So I think the biggest takeaway is it's all connected. Right? If you think about where we started, which is that AI and the impact on repeated work and how it goes to repeated problems. You take that to the impact of education and how just the very nature of education needs to change. And the whole idea of serendipity, collaboration, and creativity and how they come together. And you think about the impact on climate and policy around climate or accounting for climate. Ultimately, we're just going through probably the biggest shift since the dinosaurs. Where everything that we understand about living is going to change. And I think to that point you mentioned, also somebody mentioned about the budget spent on World War II. The amount of money we're going to spend now to relearn everything that we think we understand about our existence. From the work we'll do to how we will earn, to the resources we will deplete, to the rate at which we'll deplete them. It's fortunately or unfortunately all connected. And so, unlike the Industrial Revolution where you had a couple of people that made the change, my sort of big takeaway from this is the change has to be made by an overwhelming number of people, not a few North Stars.
And do you feel, I mean, you're deeply involved in the technology industry, you've been a serial tech entrepreneur. Do you feel that we are maybe perhaps getting to the point in the tech world, which many of us who have been in for many years, we're obsessed with, build another Uber, build a social network, exit, move fast, break things. Do you think there's some sort of cultural change going on where we can make those connections, as you said, that a refugee can become a developer and use your platform to become highly skilled and well paid and perhaps invest in solar power or in an emerging economy. Is that connection starting to be made, especially amongst people moving the needle as you do in the tech world?
So I think it is, Mike. There's a cost of being good. And unfortunately, it's more expensive than the cost of not being good. And so when you allow people to earn more and create an equilibrium or parity between the cost of being good and the cost of not being good, the hope is that they will be good. I think the second thing is that we entered this, probably for the last 20, 30 years, this restless period of innovation. I almost felt at times it was innovation for the sake of innovation. And I'm hoping we now, given that we have 7.5 years, we are doing restless innovation where it's not just for the sake of it, but it's towards this wider theme.
Right, exactly. This is very much the moment, I think, don't you think? Well, we've had a fantastic discussion, really wonderful speakers. I've been blown away at the talent here attending in Davos and attending all of the events around this week. We're going to be continuing the Pathfounder project, which is going very much about sustainable and impact-driven entrepreneurship, impact-driven innovation to address some of these big issues like climate, for instance, of course, and society. So, but for now, from me, Mike Butcher from TechCrunch and Pathfounder, and from Sachin from Builder, thank you very much for attending us, and thank you to Digital Davos. And we have the room, guys, if you want to stay and have a drink or a coffee. We have a room for a few minutes, so relax and be on us.